My mom passed away. Oh, I see. I'm currently overseas. That's what my husband, who's been away for work, blurted out over the phone upon hearing the news of my mother's sudden passing. Not only was he not planning to return home, but he was also embarking on an overseas trip. I was stunned, but what unfolded 3 days later was even more surreal. His own parents passed away, and I couldn't reach him. The grim reality of being unable to attend his parents' funeral due to his decisions would soon haunt him. I'm Nancy, a 54-year-old homemaker. Our son, 20, recently moved out, leaving just Thomas and me at home. Our relationship started through a matchmaking effort by my late father and his longtime friend. They thought it fitting since we were both working at the same company and seemed compatible. It felt almost like an arranged meeting. We discovered shared interests in music and travel and quickly grew close. With our parents' encouragement, we married swiftly, blessed with a child, and enjoyed a harmonious married life. When our child turned 10, my father passed away after battling illness. Aside from that, our lives were relatively peaceful. However, there was one aspect of parenting that troubled me deeply. As a homemaker, our livelihood depended on my husband's salary, for which I was grateful. Yet he often claimed he was too busy with work, staying late into the night and arriving home just before the last train, when he came home at all. Some nights, a brief text saying, "I'll stay at the company tonight," was all I received. Many of the meals I lovingly prepared went uneaten. I wished he would inform me earlier if he couldn't make it home, and I questioned whether he was truly that occupied. My husband worked at the same company where my father once did. Despite my father's frequent business trips, he always made it home by nightfall or stayed overnight at work. With mortgage payments, raising our child, and daily expenses weighing on us, I couldn't voice my discontent loudly, knowing all our income came from his efforts. But his work shouldn't have exempted him from household responsibilities or caring for our child. My frustration grew as he consistently prioritized time with friends on his days off. The only glimpse our son had of his father was waking up to find him asleep beside him in the morning. Once our son began to speak, I realized he saw his father not as a parent but as a distant figure always absent from home. It felt overwhelming, like I was shouldering the burden of raising our child alone. I had confided this to my father once, but he dismissed it, insisting, "Thomas is doing his best at our company. Don't criticize your husband." Must I always support him unquestioningly? My father staunchly believed in traditional gender roles. My mother, in turn, would listen to my grievances and gently remark, "He doesn't understand the hardships of a woman," with a resigned smile. After my father passed away, my mother's vitality faded, and I felt I couldn't burden her with my complaints about Thomas. Though she often complained about my father to me, deep down, she loved him. I had hoped to emulate my parents' loving household, but despite outward appearances, ours was different. In truth, I yearned for mutual respect. Before I knew it, a decade had passed in much the same routine. Even after our son grew up and moved out, our daily life remained largely unchanged. One day, I cautiously expressed my feelings to my husband, who rarely paid attention to household matters. "Listen, dear, now that our son is grown and living on his own, perhaps you don't need to work such long hours. I'd like you to come home earlier and spend more time here with us. We could tackle chores together, share meals." My intention was simply to encourage him to spend more time at home, but he took offense at the mention of chores and reacted with anger. "What do you think I'm working so hard for every day? And you don't even work. You expect me to come home exhausted and still do housework?" With that, he yelled and slammed the front door as he stormed out of the house. The resounding slam echoed his deep frustration. At this rate, he might not return home for days. Though my heart ached deeply, my mind strangely stayed calm. Why is it like this? All I want is a harmonious life with my husband. Did I say something wrong? Could I have handled it better to avoid upsetting him? My mother, in similar situations, seemed to handle them with grace. What's different between her and me? As I pondered, tears began to trickle down my face without my realizing it. 4 days later, my husband returned home. I'm sorry, I apologized to him. I wasn't entirely sure what I was apologizing for. I didn't feel like I had done anything wrong, yet I always apologized, and he always forgave me. This had become our routine way of reconciling. "Yeah, whatever," he said, but our relationship clearly deteriorated after that. Or perhaps it was just my dissatisfaction. Until now, I had always assumed fault and acted submissive. But this time, I couldn't feel that way anymore. I found I couldn't respect my husband. About a month later, while things remained strained between us, he dropped a bombshell. I've been transferred to Alaska. I'll be moving alone. My husband, who had grown increasingly distant, suddenly disclosed this news. Alaska, it's so far away. It feels like our hearts are already that far apart. All right, understood. Please take care. That's all I could manage to say. He packed his bags and departed for Alaska. In no time, I found myself alone in our once bustling home. It felt surreal that not long ago we were a family of 3 here. We had been married for nearly 30 years. I had soldiered on for our child's sake, but now that child was gone. Lately, it seemed divorces later in life weren't so uncommon. I wonder if we'll end up like one of those statistics. Just as I pondered this, my smartphone rang. It was my mother calling. Perhaps I could seek her advice on this matter. Perfect timing, I muttered as I picked up the phone. Hello, I'm Dr. Johnson from Chicago General Hospital. Am I speaking with the daughter of the phone's owner? A sinking feeling washed over me. Yes, I'm her daughter. Is something wrong with my mom at the hospital? Please stay calm. Your mother passed away recently due to acute heart failure. We need you to come to the hospital right away. Everything went black before my eyes. My mom is gone. Could there be some mistake? Just last week, she sounded perfectly fine on the phone. Hello? Are you still there? Hello? I'm sorry. I'm just in shock and confused. That's understandable. My condolences for your loss. I'll be there as soon as possible. Please tell me the address. I rushed to the hospital. At the reception desk, I provided my name and was directed to her room. Upon seeing her lifeless form, there was no doubt it was my mother. Facing the reality, the weight of her absence settled in. Until I arrived at the hospital, part of me hoped it was a mistake, that maybe my mom had just misplaced her phone, and someone else had a heart issue. It all feels so sudden. I hadn't even had the chance to thank her properly for raising me. Could you give us some time alone? I asked, and the nurse kindly left the room. That's when I finally let myself break down and cry. After gathering myself, I began to make arrangements for the funeral. Let's see. First, I need to reach out to the relatives and make arrangements. And I should also inform Thomas. I dialed my husband Thomas's number. He answered with a distant tone, and as I explained the situation, he simply replied, I see. Not just I see. The funeral is happening soon. I need you here. He informed me he was about to embark on an overseas trip with colleagues, a statement that inadvertently drew a sharp response from me. He defended himself, citing his constant work and asserting the right to take time off. Deciding not to argue further, knowing it would lead to, who do you think provides for us? I contacted our son, and together we organized the funeral. Seeing I was struggling, our son offered to stay with me for a while, taking a break from college to lend support. As soon as the funeral concluded and I hoped for a moment of respite, a call came from my husband's brother. Tragically, my in-laws had been involved in a fatal car accident. Despite the successive family tragedies, I still couldn't reach my husband. Modern smartphones usually work overseas, but I can't get through to Dad, my son remarked. Depending on the country or his phone settings, he might not be able to receive calls. Deciding to try email instead, I wrote, he'll surely get in touch once he returns from his trip. A week passed with no reply. When my son checked with his office, they confirmed he was on paid leave but due back in 3 days. What country is he in? Has he not seen my emails? What about his parents? Suspicious that my husband might be with his mistress, I hired a private investigator. Within 3 days, I got the answer. He was indeed having an affair. My husband took a woman he met on his trip to Japan sightseeing. I received several photos of them happily exploring the city together. It seems he's having quite a good time. In his new assignment in Alaska, I questioned what I had been accommodating all this time. Was it concern for my hard-working husband? In reality, he's just a deceitful man who travels abroad for pleasure and engages in affairs. This might not be his first time. Filled with anger, fueled by years of patience, I called my husband's office and urgently requested to speak with him. Hello? What's so urgent? I've asked you not to disturb me at work unless it's important. Didn't you read my email? Our parents have passed away. You mean your mom, right? You mentioned that earlier. Are you still upset about it? I finally managed to take some time off. No, I mean your parents. They were in a car accident. What? Are you serious? Why would I make something like this up? You claim to have just returned from abroad, but I've heard you've been back for days. Why haven't you been checking your emails? My husband seemed speechless, struggling to accept the sudden reality confronting him. Hello? Are you there? Yeah, his voice trembled. Though he had shown no hesitation in missing my mother's funeral, the news of his own parents seemed to rattle him. The funeral is done, and they've already been cremated. It's too late for remorse. I felt no sympathy as I coldly added, "You need to come back immediately." I thought I heard a strained response from him, but I hung up without acknowledging it. Mom, what's going on? He's on his way home now. And just so you know, I'm filing for divorce from your father today. What? Why all of a sudden? I understand you're upset he hasn't been reachable during this busy time, but isn't divorce a bit extreme? I laid out everything to my son. It was a harsh reality to burden him with, but he's an adult now. I believed it was better to be honest than to fabricate excuses. This is indefensible. I'm standing by you, Mom. With my son's support assured, everything was prepared. Soon after, my husband arrived home. "I'm back." His tone, usually brash, now lacked its usual vigor. He appeared as a pitiful man, having lost both parents at once and unable to attend their funerals. "But I need to talk to you. Your brother was pretty upset about everything, you know." I couldn't help it. Even after returning to Japan, I was busy with client meetings. Quite a young client, isn't she? With that, I showed him the picture I received from the private investigator. "What? Where did you get this? Look at you two, arm in arm, having a good time. If this really is just a client, have you picked up some new tricks? It seems like this isn't your first time." I dropped the bombshell, and the impact was immediate. "So I've been caught," my husband admitted without hesitation. He must have realized there was no point in trying to deny it. I pressed on. "You didn't even try to see your parents in their final moments, let alone mine." "Shut up. You have no idea how stressful my job is. I work tirelessly to support this family. And yes, even you, who does nothing, aren't blameless." My husband showed no remorse, only defensiveness. You're despicable. I'm ashamed to call you my father. Let's end this. Let's get a divorce. I'll file for alimony later. Your personal belongings will be sent from this house via FedEx. I'll be relieved to be rid of a parasite like you. You'll get the standard alimony, but don't expect any more than that. I had thought I was doing everything for my husband, but had he really seen me as a burden all this time? What had I been enduring all these years? Considering the money he spent on his numerous affairs, I decided to claim $45,000 in alimony. Whether he could afford it or not, he paid it in one lump sum. Previously, I used to keep track of our finances, so I had a rough idea of his financial situation. However, his overseas escapades with mistresses, bringing them to Japan and partying, coupled with his absence at his own parents' funerals, caused rumors to circulate within the company, leading to his resignation. He had held a respectable position at the company, which he likely believed he had earned on merit. In reality, his entry into the company had been facilitated through his parents' connections. Now, lacking any special skills, my husband struggled to secure even part-time work after failing to find another full-time job. According to my brothers-in-law, losing his family, job, and now his parents without the chance to say goodbye seemed to be pushing my husband to his limits. He can't sleep without taking sleeping pills and is reportedly seeing a psychiatrist. I felt no sympathy whatsoever. My son, who had promised to stay with me during this turbulent divorce, returned home concerned about my physical and mental exhaustion. I think I'll live modestly with my son. Looking ahead, I probably should have saved the alimony, but I needed a change of scenery. So I've decided to take my first overseas trip with my son. After that, I plan to start working part-time. The thought of trying something new fills me with excitement. It feels like my life is just beginning.